Hello and welcome to this biology lesson, and the topic today is joint. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to define a joint and outline the classification and types of joint. So what exactly is a joint? A joint can be defined as the point at which two or more bones meet. Now let's go on to discuss the main components of joints: the cartilage, synovial membrane, ligaments, tendons, and synovial fluid. First, the cartilage. The cartilage is a type of tissue that covers the surface of a bone at a joint. Cartilage helps reduce the friction of movement within a joint. Then the synovial membrane. The synovial membrane is a tissue that lines the joint and seals it into a joint capsule. The synovial membrane secretes a clear sticky fluid called the synovial fluid, which helps to lubricate the joint. Ligaments. Ligaments are strong, elastic bands of connective tissue that surround the joint to give support and limit the joint movement. Ligaments connect bones together. Tendons. Tendons are another type of tough connective tissue on each side of a joint attached to muscles that control movement of the joint. Tendons connect muscles to bones. And lastly, the synovial fluid. This is the clear sticky fluid secreted by the synovial membrane. Joints can be classified based on their structure and their function. According to structural classification, joints are of the following types: the fibrous joint, cartilagenous joint, and synovial joint. Fibrous joints are joints held together by fibrous connective tissue. Fibrous joints do not have any cavity or space between the bones and therefore do not move at all. An example of fibrous joints are the sutures found only in the skull. Cartilagenous joints are joints with bones connected by cartilage, which is either hyaline cartilage or fibrocartilage. An example of cartilagenous joint is found between the vertebrae and between the pubic bones. The synovial joints are joints that have a space between the bones involved in the joint. This space is referred to as the synovial cavity, and it's filled with synovial fluid. The synovial fluid lubricates the joint, reducing friction between the bones and allowing for greater movement. The ends of the bones are covered with articular cartilage. Synovial joints are capable of the greatest movement. Examples are joints found in the knee, elbow, and the shoulder. So these are types of joints according to the structural classification. The fibrous joints are immovable. Example, the sutures found in the skull. Cartilagenous joints allow some degree of movement, as we have it in between the vertebrae, while the synovial joints allow for more movement. For instance, the joint of the hip, as we have it in this example. Based on the function and the movement permitted by the joint, skeletal joints can be classified as follows. The hinge joint. In this type of joint, the slightly rounded end of one bone fits into the slightly hollow end of the other bone. In this way, one bone moves while the other remains stationary, similar to the hinge of a door. An example is the elbow joint. Secondly, pivot joint. This consists of the rounded end of one bone fitting into a ring formed by the other bone. This structure allows rotational movement as the rounded bone moves around its own axis. An example of the joint is the joint between the first and second vertebrae of the neck that allows the head to move back and forth, and the wrist joint that allows the palm of the hand to be turned up and down. Thirdly, gliding joints. These are joints in which relatively flat bones slide over each other. There is very little rotation or angular movement of bones in gliding joints. Examples are the joints of the carpal and tarsal bones. Then lastly, ball and socket joints. These possess a rounded ball-like end of one bone fitting into a cup-like socket of another bone. These allow the greatest range of motion, about 360-degree movement. Examples are the shoulder and hip joints. So we have examples of joint according to the functional classification shown here. The ball and socket joint at the shoulder, hinge joint at the elbow, gliding joint at the wrist, and the pivot joint at the neck. Thank you for watching. If you have questions or comments, you can drop them as comments below, and I will do the best I can to attend to your questions and your comments.